Former Chicago White Sox manager and now special advisor Tony La Russa clarified he's not meddling in the team's decisions. Should you and I believe him? Better yet, I'll discuss why you and I should be deeply worried that he's still around the team next on Lockdown White Sox.
You are Locked On White Sox, your daily Chicago White Sox podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
And hello, I'm your host, Todd Welter, a lifelong Sox fan and the site expert of Southside Showdown, part of the Fansided Network. You can check out my written content at southsideshowdown.com. Also, I've covered Major League Baseball for outlets such as the Associated Press. And thanks for making Locked On White Sox your first listen every day. We are free and available wherever you get your podcasts and on YouTube, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. And make sure to subscribe to the YouTube channel at Locked On White Sox. Also follow or subscribe to the show wherever you get your podcasts. Chicago Sun-Times White Sox beat reporter Daryl Van Schouwen had a write-up in the Sun-Times about Tony La Russa discussing his current role with the team. You remember Tony, right? The manager who got rehired by owner Jerry Reinsdorf, so Jerry could make up for the regret he had when he fired Tony back in the mid-1980s. And then Tony helped ruin that contention window. I'll discuss his comments about his special advisor role and why you and I should still be concerned that he is still around the team. Then the Sox lost 3-0 last night to the Los Angeles Dodgers. Garrett Crochet, though, was amazing. And let's discuss some more data points in him achieving elite ace status. And finally, James Fox of FutureSox will be on the show tomorrow, so no Way Back Wednesday. So let's do a Throwback Tuesday instead. This episode is brought to you by Prize Picks, the easiest and most exciting way to play daily fantasy sports. Go to prizepicks.com/LockedOnMLB and use code all lowercase LockedOnMLB for a first deposit match. Now, the main point in talking about Tony La Russa is he can minimize his influence within the organization. You know, he can say, hey, I'm just a special advisor, all he wants. But there is no way in heck you and I should believe him that he's not the shadow GM of the team. You know, he's trying to say, I'm not in charge, just an advisor here to give some advice. But I don't buy that for a second. This team reeks of La Russa's influence. You know, it does not hit home runs, despite being in a homer-friendly ballpark. And Chris Getz can claim pitching, free agent pitchers told him about the poor defense. But Tony has always valued pitching and defense and winning without a ton of superstars during his Cardinals days. Remember, it was Albert Pujols and Adam Wainwright and Yadier Molina and not much else. And the mere fact that one of the primary responsible parties for this team's decay over that contention window earlier this, a couple of years back, still has a role with this team is enough to add more apathy toward this franchise and more frustration toward a very selfish owner. There's no reason Tony La Russa should still be around the Chicago White Sox, except his buddy, Jerry Reinsdorf, wants to help Tony stay around baseball because Tony is a baseball junkie, at least in my opinion. I've covered the guy. I've met the guy. He does love baseball. So you can take that to the bank when he says, I love baseball. That's authentic. What I'm not finding authentic is the comments he made to Daryl Van Schouwen. You can check it out on chicago.suntimes.com. Here's some snippets from the write-up. The Hall of Fame manager's baseball opinions and knowledge are held in high regard by general manager Chris Getz, manager Pedro Grifol, and other Sox hierarchy. But La Russa made it clear again in a conversation with the Sun-Times Monday that he is not a decision maker. All right, timeout right there. I've been around Tony La Russa. I've covered him. He does have a way of kind of minimizing. He kind of looks at things very narrow. So he might think that he's not influencing decisions. But Van Schouwen just wrote it. Getz and Grifol hold his opinion in high regard. And so do other people in the hierarchy, aka I'm just going to make an assumption, jump to conclusions, Matt, Jerry Reinsdorf. So basically what he says is almost going to be like gospel. At least that's my assumption. Anyways, with Getz the primary decision maker after the Kenny Williams, Rick Hahn vice president GM team was fired last August, the notion that Russa is filling a void left by Williams, the former vice president, is off base, he said. Quote, no, my job description has absolutely zero in common with the vice president of the team, end quote. Okay, then what is it you say you do here, Tony? Well, explaining what he does, LaRussa said, quote, I'm a special advisor, which means I can advise throughout the organization. I evaluate talent, but I'm not a scout. I'm about how we should come together as a winning team, what the effort is like, and how the game is being executed. If you don't like how we're running the bases or taking at bats or making good pitches and plays, you can point the finger at me for having a relevance to that. It's totally advisory. You have opinions, but you don't go out there pushing them on anyone. That's not an advisor role. I don't have an agenda. I haven't had a thought about interfering. Very simply, build relationships so people in the organization know that they can trust me. Mostly, I'm observing. If somebody wants me in a meeting, they tell me, but I've been around advisors as a manager, and the worst thing you can do is be a bull in a china shop, come barging in and get in the way. End quote. Or actually, let's continue. LaRussa has conversations with Grifol and his coaches and offers views on player development, quote, how to build clubhouse culture and as importantly, how you play the game and how you execute it. That's pretty much it. Are we playing the game hard enough? And you can play hard, but if you don't execute, the game is meant to be executed. I have a lot of experience understanding how you can make that happen, end quote. And like I said, I've covered LaRussa a bunch of times. One of my biggest roles at the Associated Press when I covered baseball is I would go into the losers clubhouse, and I used to always seem to be like I would draw, or I don't know what it was, but I would always draw the St. Louis Cardinals. And entering that clubhouse was miserable. I mean, there was like no joy in that clubhouse, and I'd have to go cover Tony La Russa. And honestly, he has a very narrow perception. So he has a way of minimizing things. That's just my perception of him. So in his mind, yeah, he thinks he's just a special advisor. He's just giving out some advice, hanging around. But the first thing is, why is he hanging around? The game has passed him by. And allow me to put on my, figurative tinfoil hat here. In the offseason, the goal was to improve the clubhouse culture. Tony literally said he gives advice on how to improve the clubhouse culture. And yes, it made sense to improve it because it got so toxic under Williams and Hahn. But Tony was part of the fun police. He sucked the swagger out of that team. And gee, I wonder where Getz got the idea to improve the clubhouse culture. Also, Tony still with the team is because of Jerry. And if the owner values his word, then Tony's word pretty much comes with the authority of ownership. He can downplay it all he wants, but when La Russa speaks, if I'm Getz or Grifol, I'm thinking it's coming from the mouth of Jerry. And in addition, why does this team still look behind the times? I would theorize it's because of Jerry's outdated views and influence by Tony's outdated views. And the Sox have a guy giving out advice and influence after it was clearly proven the game has passed him by. Want a couple of examples? Ken Rosenthal's piece in The Athletic in 2022 when he begged Tony to take the rest of the season off after that health scare he had. And yes, La Russa eventually stayed away from the team. But here is what Ken Rosenthal had to say. Your relationship with coaches was another issue. Most staffs today are highly collaborative. Your style is far more autonomous. Some coaches were okay with that, I'm told. Others were not. Your emphasis on hits and contact ran counter to the hitting coach's goals of achieving power through patience. Okay? Think about that. Tony prioritized contact in a homer-friendly ballpark, in a home run era, when the data says hit the ball far. Remember when Tony didn't know the ghost runner rules? Remember when Tony did an intentional walk with a 1-2 count? Now, if Tony's role was simply, hey, can you go check out a prospect we're thinking of taking in the 13th round? Can you just see how the ball comes off his bat? or how it pops in the glove. Those little tiny things that I still think analytics overlooks. Okay, fine. But this team is lacking in the analytics. It's lacking in the modern times. And while he did love numbers, he loved to be very autonomous. He took it himself. And I have a feeling that that's one of the reasons why the White Sox have one of the smallest analytic staffs in baseball. Hey, Tony didn't need that many guys. And especially it's in an era where you should be using data, development techniques such as a pitch lab, and outside the box thinking. That is why I am terrified that Tony La Russa is in on meetings, at games, on road trips. And if he wants to be around the game, fine. Have him sit in the owner's box with Tony or with Jerry. Have him, or as I said, send him to Kannapolis. Send him to some random high school baseball game and say, hey, Tony, we're looking at this guy with no intention of drafting him. But don't have him around the team anymore. Be a modern baseball franchise. Tony represents a game that is long passed by. Well, speaking of losing, the Sox were shut out 3-0. They were in it for 5 2/3 innings thanks to Garrett Crochet before he was pulled. Let's discuss Crochet's continued ascension into being an elite pitcher next. Locked On White Sox. Here on Locked On White Sox, we pride ourselves on getting you the latest news for your team, whether it's the offseason, the draft, spring training, or the playoffs. It's year-round. You know what else is year-round? Collection season. Just because tax season is over doesn't mean the IRS will stop coming after you for unfiled taxes. The IRS can garnish your wages, levy your bank accounts, and even seize your property. Don't let the IRS target you. Let the licensed professionals and tax experts at Tax Network USA go to bat for you. I used to work in banking collections, and trust me, the IRS has the tools to follow through on what it can do to recover the money. The bank may say, hey, we can do this, this, and this, but they might not be able to follow through. The IRS can, especially if it thinks you owe them. So don't mess around. Don't go it alone. Use Tax Network USA. With over 14 years of experience and an A+ rating by the Better Business Bureau, Tax Network USA has saved their clients over $1 billion in tax debt. Whether you owe taxes, have complicated matters that require tax planning, or finally hit that parlay this season and need help correctly filing, call 1-800-549-1000. That's 1-800-549-1000, or visit tnusa.com/locked-on. See the link in this episode description below. And get supplies from the site that's made for the skilled trades, supplyhouse.com. Supplyhouse.com is the reliable way to order plumbing, HVAC, and electrical products online. Their easy-to-use website is packed with helpful resources and the latest product info to help you get the job done right. Shop a complete inventory of over 200,000 parts from over 400 top brands and get your order delivered right to your door with fast shipping from coast to coast. Need help with an order? Get expert support and industry-leading service from the friendliest folks in the business and talk to a real person every time. Pros in the skilled trades can get a competitive edge by joining supplyhouse.com's free Trademaster program. Every Trademaster gets access to a dedicated phone line, free shipping, and discounts on every order. Join the thousands of trade pros already benefiting from their free membership at supplyhouse.com/TM and order plumbing, HVAC, and electrical supplies from anywhere with just a few clicks at supplyhouse.com. And are you watching Fox Sports or ESPN on your TV all day? Have to turn down the volume with all that shouting? Make the switch to Locked On Sports Today, a free 24/7 sports streaming channel program for you every day to bring you the biggest sports stories without all that screaming. Locked On Sports Today brings you can't-miss analysis, opinions, and news streaming 24/7 on YouTube or the free Amazon Fire TV channels app, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. And the White Sox continue a 3-game home series against the Dodgers. First pitch of the second game in this series is at 7:10 p.m. Central. Catch every pitch of the White Sox hometown broadcast with SiriusXM on the SXM app. Search White Sox. And welcome back to Locked On White Sox. I'm your host, Todd Welter, and thank you for making the show your first listen. lots of great White Sox podcasts out there like FutureSox. And James Fox of FutureSox will be joining me tomorrow to discuss the MLB draft and the MLB combine specifically. The Sox, they do not have a top 10 pick next year. So there's no reward for being historically bad. So that's why having the number 5 pick is going to be so big for this franchise's future. So I want James on to talk about the MLB combine and maybe how the prospects that the Sox have and will draft will help with the competitive timeline. So again, a lot of great podcasts out there. Just ask that you listen to me first. And make sure to subscribe to the YouTube channel at Locked On White Sox. Also follow or subscribe to the show on wherever you get your podcasts. Sorry, I had to take a quick water sip there. Again, I'm not slurping coffee for the haters out there. Strictly water, getting in my 8-ounce glasses a day. All right, I've already certified Garrett Crochet is an ace. The next level up for him is to achieve being a potential perennial top 5 Cy Young vote getting ace. That's the next step. I have a pretty good idea or pretty good feeling that he's going to be named to the All-Star team. So that we should check off the list. We've already checked off ace status, stud dude. Now it's just being a perennial top 5 vote getting Cy Young award winner. Potentially even winning a Cy Young. Otherwise getting top 5 votes. And man, he turned in an outing that will help him garner some votes as he blanked the Los Angeles Dodgers potent lineup for 5 2/3 innings last night. He allowed 5 hits and struck out 6. He reached 91 pitches, and that was it for him at 5 2/3 innings, as the Sox are going to keep him on his pitch limit as he is a first-year starter. Also, he had Tommy John surgery in 2022, so makes sense. Got to ease him in. And once he left, that is when the losing happened, as reliever Steven Wilson gave up 2 runs the next inning. So with Crochet on the mound, the White Sox have a shot at beating any team, regardless of how bad this organization is. I mean, they are on track to being one of the worst teams in franchise history. But with Garrett Crochet, they have a chance to win. And that is why I keep dying on the hill in my argument to not trade him. Think about it. The worst team in baseball was able to go toe-to-toe with one of the best teams in baseball because they had a guy on the mound that was special. And I get that the timeline and the calculus might not add up, but hey, you extend Garrett Crochet. Just a thought there. He just turned 25. I don't know. Maybe give him a 4-year extension. That's just my thought. And want to know how special Crochet was last night? Shohei Ohtani, the best hitter in baseball. A guy that everybody right now, if you're in Chicago or near Chicago and you're listening, buy tickets. And if you don't want to give Jerry your money, go to the Game Time app, one of the sponsors of the show, and get a ticket and go see Shohei Ohtani. He is worth the price of admission. Shohei Ohtani is not only a generational talent, he's a draw. He is something that you have to see in your lifetime. Well, he struck out in the first, grounded out in the third, struck out looking in the fifth against Crochet. Crochet actually owns Ohtani. Ohtani is 0 for 5 against Crochet. And Ohtani loves hitting at guaranteed rate. Lamont Pope of the Chicago Tribune has a great write-up about it. This is what he had. Ohtani entered Monday with a career 318, 393, 798 slash line in 35 games against the Sox. He has 16 home runs, his 4th most against any major league club, and 35 RBIs. He has 6 home runs and 19 RBIs in 16 games at Guaranteed Rate Field. And then here's what Crochet had to say about matching up against Ohtani. Quote, "Those are the matchups that you want. Those are the matchups that you go to bed thinking about the night before. That's how it's been every time I've faced him. Just got to know I have to be on my A game to get him out," end quote. And think about that. Last year, Shohei Ohtani in 7 games against the White Sox had a 440, 548, 1.360 slash line, 7 home runs, 10 RBIs, and 5 walks. And Crochet rendered him useless. And also, remember when Our owner, Jerry Reinsdorf, laughed at the idea of the Sox trying to pursue Ohtani in free agency. Yeah, that's another reason why the White Sox are in the miserable state that they are. Now, facing one elite hitter does not make a Cy Young career, but it's just another data point that Crochet can face the best of them and get them out. He did struggle with Freddie Freeman. He got 2 hits, but he never crossed home. Why? Because Garrett Crochet was able to make sure the Dodgers could not take advantage. This start again was just another data point in the ascension of Garrett Crochet. Sign him to a contract extension, please. All right, so I got James Fox of FutureSox on the show tomorrow to talk about the MLB Combine as the Sox get closer to the MLB Draft. And that is going to push the way back Wednesday. That's usually when I talk about the better days of the organization. So let's do a Throwback Tuesday. And they say nothing separates a boy and his love of that non-all-star player he had as a kid. So I want to show appreciation for the one dog, Lance Johnson, next on Locked On White Sox. And if more or less is more your style or strength, a wise man once said, play to your strengths. Then let me tell you about Prize Picks. Prize Picks is America's #1 daily fantasy sports app with over 5 million active users. Unlike other apps on Prize Picks, it's just you against the numbers. All you do is pick more or less on 2 to 6 player stat projections and watch the winnings roll in. And you can now win up to 100 times your money on Prize Picks with as little as 4 correct picks. You can turn $10 into 1,000. Prize Picks is available in more than 30 states across the country, including California, Texas, and Georgia. Now, the White Sox have Chris Flexen starting tonight, and he does get into jams. While he's been good at escaping them lately, maybe you might want to check out the more or less they have on the Dodgers just in case. Shohei Ohtani to hit a home run is 0.5, and I just pointed out how many home runs he has hit at the rate. Freddie Freeman's more or less total bases is 1.5, and he had 2 hits against yesterday against Crochet, and he's facing Flexen tonight. And again, people are going to get on base against Chris Flexen. It's just a matter of can he escape with minimal damage. Download the Prize Picks apps today and use code LOCKEDONMLB for a first deposit match up to $100. That's code LOCKEDONMLB Prize on Prize Picks for a deposit match up to $100. Pick more, pick less. It's that easy. And the Sox continue a 3-game home series against the Dodgers. First pitch of the second game is at 7:10 p.m. Central. Catch every pitch of the White Sox hometown broadcast with SiriusXM on the SXM app. Search White Sox. And welcome back into Locked On White Sox. I am your host, Todd Welter. Thank you for sticking with me this long. Shout out to all my everydayers out there. Hope you're growing by the day in terms of numbers, listening to me. Again, lots of great White Sox podcasts out there. Hope I'm doing a good job of giving you White Sox information every day. I know they're terrible, and I know that you can check out. But if you still want to come back in every now and again, I'm here. I'm here every day, except for Saturday and Sunday, because my mind needs a break. And even then, I'm on TikTok every now and again, or I'll throw a short up on YouTube. All right, one of the most underrated players of those early, very competitive 1990s teams was Lance Johnson, the one dog. He is definitely probably the most underrated player on those teams. And those teams from 1990 to 1995 featured superstars such as Frank Thomas and Jack McDowell, along with future Hall of Famer Tim Rock Raines. You had Robin Ventura protecting Frank in the lineup, Ozzie Guillen providing flair and charisma, along with Joey Cora at second base, providing that flair and charisma. Bo Jackson, Julio Franco, Ellis Burks, they made cameo appearances on the Sox. You even had a young Sammy Sosa for a little bit. Let's not forget the rotation after McDowell. You had Alex Fernandez, Wilson Alvarez, and Jason Beret. But there was always the steady play of the team's center fielder in Lance Johnson, who was a vital cog to the Sox success at the beginning of that decade. Johnson played for the Sox from 1988 to 1995. In his 8 seasons with the Sox, his slash line was 286, 325, .373. Now, he wasn't a power hitter. Had 17 career home runs on the South Side and 34 total in his 14 seasons. But what he could do was he could hit and swipe bases in an era when stealing bases was cool. The one dog stole 226 bases for the Sox. He led the AL in hits in 1995, his last season with the Sox, with 186. He had a .354 on-base percentage in 1993, where he also hit .311 when the Sox went to the playoffs. He did not strike out a lot. Had 258 career strikeouts on the South Side, and he played 14 seasons and struck out just 384 times. That's striking out 43 times on average in a season. And now think about that. In an era where guys are regularly striking out at least 100 times, Lance was striking out less than 50. He finished with a 26.4 career FWAR. Normally was hitting either leadoff, second, or seventh, especially when the Sox got Tim Raines. Johnson was definitely not going to be leading off. I believe towards like the 93, he was usually hitting seventh because you had Joey Cora to hit second. Ozzie sometimes would hit second. They had that nice rotation. The Sox had a great balanced lineup in that era of guys that could hit to get on base. Because remember, you had to hit to get on base. And power, you had Frank and Robin. And while his numbers will never get him into the Hall of Fame, and he made just one All-Star team when he went in 1996 with the Mets, he will always be that player that I will love unconditionally from my days as a young White Sox fan. Feel free to leave comments about your favorite underrated White Sox player on the episode page on YouTube, X, formerly Twitter, at Todd J. Dub or at Locked On Sox, or you can email me at lockedonwhitesox@gmail.com. Well, that wraps up this edition of Locked On White Sox, but before I go, are you watching Fox Sports or ESPN on your TV all day? Have to turn down the volume with all that shouting? Make the switch to Locked On Sports Today, a free 24/7 sports streaming channel program for you every day to bring you the biggest sports stories without all that screaming. Locked On Sports Today brings you can't-miss analysis, opinions, and news, streaming 24/7 on YouTube or the free Amazon Fire TV channels app, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. And I'll be back tomorrow with James Fox from FutureSox.net and the Future Sox podcast to talk about the MLB Combine as I get you ready for the MLB Draft. Again, the Sox have the number 5 pick and won't be able to pick in the top 10 next year because of the new lottery rules. So this is a very important draft for the future of the organization. Make sure to subscribe to the YouTube page at Locked On White Sox or follow or subscribe to the show on wherever you get your podcasts, and have a great day. I'll see you tomorrow.